He was supposed to fly to Beirut tonight to join them.
I want to talk to them. I want to hold them. I want to kiss them.
The last time he spoke with them, they were taking shelter in a school in the city of Tyre, south of Beirut, when he heard the sounds of bombing before the line went dead.
I've heard that the bomb by myself. I hear the screaming for the kids crying and yelling. And since that momentarily and then up to this moment, I've never slept last night. It's since the invasion, since the aggression actually to be started to South Lebanon, I feel my heart is broken.
It's been very stressful. It's been very upsetting.
Janie Respitz is also losing sleep these days. Her 18-year-old son, Gilad, is traveling in Israel this summer and working as a volunteer firefighter.
So far, thank God, he's been safe, and we speak to him on a regular basis. But it's been a very difficult, trying few days.
She's been trying to take her mind off her son, but with the situation deteriorating, it hasn't been easy.
Right now, he is further south for where most of the hostility has been. But, you know, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
And that's the hardest part, not knowing what's going to happen in the conflict and not knowing how safe their loved ones really are. Melissa Fung, CBC News, Toronto.
For Prime Minister Harper, the Middle East mess has become a serious foreign policy test. He's facing some tough questions about his responses at key stages of the conflict. But today, as the G8 summit wrapped up in Russia, Harper insisted he's been right all along. Our chief political correspondent, Keith Bogue, reports.
Harper met reporters and spoke first about the families of Canadian citizens killed yesterday in Lebanon as a result of an Israeli airstrike.
Yesterday, we also received the news of the tragic deaths of Canadians in Lebanon. I want to offer my condolences to their families.
He was asked about his prepared statement last week that characterized Israel's military response, an attack on Beirut's airport and the deaths of dozens of Lebanese civilians, as measured. How did that square with his support of a G8 statement yesterday, urging Israel to use the utmost restraint? A lot has changed in a few days, he said.
I think our evaluation of the situation has been accurate. Obviously, there's been an ongoing escalation. And frankly, ongoing escalation is inevitable once conflict begins. We go back to what the causes of the conflict were. I think those are clear.
And for those who accuse him of not being critical enough of Israel, he had this.
We are not going to give in to the temptation of some to single out Israel, which was the victim of the initial attack.
Everywhere there was talk of the Middle East crisis, some of it in uncharacteristically plain and blunt language.
We're not blaming the Lebanese government.
At lunch, U.S. President George Bush was overheard telling British Prime Minister Tony Blair that the answer to the Middle East problem is to get Syria to rein in the Hezbollah militias in Lebanon.
See, the irony is that what they need to do is get Syria to get Hezbollah to stop doing this shit, and it's over.
But what they're planning publicly is an international security monitoring force on the ground in Lebanon. Blair and UN Secretary General Kofi Annan proposed that this morning.
Unless we create the conditions in which a cessation is going to happen, then to be very, very blunt about it, the G8, the international community can issue whatever calls they want, but without the action there in place, it isn't going to happen, in my view.
And he said that won't happen until the shelling from Lebanon stops.
The only way, in my view, we are going to get a cessation of hostilities is if we have the deployment of an international force into that area that can stop the bombardment coming over into Israel.
But who would make up that force? When would it be in place? All of that is unknown. It's well known that the mission in Afghanistan is already stretching the capabilities of Canada's armed forces. Still, if asked to join a security mission in Lebanon, officials say they'd consider it, and analysts say, given the circumstances, how could Canada refuse? Keith Bogue, CBC News, St. Petersburg.